my name is Tiara Harris.
And I'm Jada Hairston. And this is our interview session in which we will cover all of the great topics that we have discussed in our Women of Color class. So, we've covered quite a bit of material in Professor Finley's Women of Color class this semester and learned so much. Let's reflect on some of the authors that we have covered and discuss some of the concepts that we have learned about with some of these questions. First, what are your impressions of the Italian priest Absinius de Castronistris' examples of human cartography?
When I studied the images, I saw the figures and faces of both men and women. I noticed that the man represents Europe and the woman represents Africa. So possibly this represents how Europe occupied the land of Africa and its resources. I think he was trying to basically show like how Europe went and took those resources back then. So this identity of the woman as Africa shows the woman as being inferior, and the representation of the man as Europe shows him as being superior, which basically shows like the conflict of Europe and Africa back then.
I agree. Historically, this is true.
Yes.
With the information that you have on Sor Juana, describe her type of writing and what she produces. How would you describe her discourse?
Sor Juana occupied the intersections of not only a woman, but also of a woman of upper class in Mexico. She had the desire to learn, and she loved Greek history and classic Greek mythology. However, during this time, the only way women could learn was if they were doing it through religious studies. So to go against this, she entered a convent to write, challenging gender differences, and her discourse served as a minority discourse, as a woman to talk about feminist viewpoints, as women and women's rights, which is something that went against this time, something that they weren't supposed to talk about. So while attacking men for how they blame women for things that they couldn't control or things that they didn't really do. And her writing angered the people of the church and the men, and she was criticized a lot for speaking on religious matters, for not speaking on religious matters like women were supposed to do during this time.
I agree. They tried to keep women in a box during this time.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that Gaspar Octavio Hernandez conforms to an aesthetic of whiteness in his poems?
Oh, most definitely. In my opinion, Gaspar didn't want to focus directly on the issues of blackness because he was pressured to substitute a racialized speech with a nationalistic one, I believe, because from what I've learned, his works are mainly for a white audience, as he focused on fighting for independence in Panama. So therefore, he felt forced to sacrifice his black identity for the welfare of the nation. He was committed to this building the nation type of project, and which shows in many of his poems, like that of Canto a la Bandera, where he expresses his happiness at the separation of Panama from Colombia. And conforming to a white aesthetic, as I believe he did, allowed him to gain more acceptance and in the end achieve his nationalistic goals.
I agree. After reading Volume 10, what would you say is the central idea that Rosario Castellanos is trying to convey, taking into consideration the readings that we all read from the Rosario Castellanos reader?
I believe that the central idea that Castellanos is trying to convey is the role of women and the stress that comes along with being a woman. Women have sacrificed their dreams to work hard for the dreams of others, I believe. The woman in the poem stresses between being a professor and a mother. And she has a busy life and intense amounts of stress that accompanies that due to her busy life. She has no enthusiasm or adventure for herself, no fun or ability to do something good for herself. So therefore, she takes pills of Volume 10 to relieve the stress of her everyday busy life and kind of like just take her mind off of it and just relax. So
I agree. How does Virginia Brandes de Salas, as a poet, convey her social experiences in her writings?
I believe Brandes de Salas conveys her social experiences through pathos, because it allows her readers to feel her strong sentiments, her strong emotions, of what is happening around her and her desire to change by embracing her African American identity. Virginia Brandes de Salas speaks of the reality of the poor and the oppressed exactly as it is presented during this time. Her works are a minority discourse that includes the themes of the struggle for the social and economic freedom of Afro-Uruguayans and the racial pride that is needed to help Afro-Uruguayans overcome their situations.
I agree. Wow. Well, thank you for answering these questions. Today's discussion was very eventful.
Yes, I agree. Thank you for the discussion.